This is a method for doing cell division on a cell that's not perfectly spherical. We're going to cheat a little bit by making it turn into mostly a sphere, then start the subdivision process. So we'll start with something like this. And if we just scrub along the animation, see it's moving around on its own a little bit. It will become spherical. It will start to cleave in the middle. It will stretch out, and then those two cells will pop off. They'll appear here because we're swapping in two new cells. So we'll do a 2-frame switch where the old cell disappears and the new ones appear. And then those new ones will go on to move apart and form those extensions back. And you can see they're also moving around according to some noise here. So the tools that we're going to use for this are pretty straightforward. We're using blendshapes in the shape editor. We're using a deformer called shrinkwrap, and we're also using a deformer called texture. And we'll also maybe add a jiggle deformer at the end just to give it a little bit of extra. So let's build this from scratch. Okay, so I've duplicated our cell and there's absolutely no animation on it at all anymore. So we'll just start this from scratch, and let's do step 1, which is to spherize this cell. Now, the way we'll do this is to make a target shape that we wanted to assume. And this is kind of a 2-part process because we're going to use blend shapes to be able to animate from this shape to a target, but we have to make that target first. And the reason we're doing it later as a blend shape is because it becomes easier to set keys on and to animate. I think it'll become clear in a minute. So if we create a cube, I'm just going to scale this up a little bit, shift right click to smooth this a couple of times, and this will be the object that we're trying to make our original cell assume the shape of. So this is the shrink wrapping. So I'll make this just a bit bigger, and I'll delete its history and freeze its transformations. And now we want to select these in a particular order. I always forget what that is. I think outer first, and then inner object, and then go to deform, shrink wrap, open the options, and just make sure it's reset and create. And I did the wrong way. So we want the outer object to be green, which means we selected it last. So inner object, then outer object. Then we'll go to deform, shrink wrap. Just hit 4 on the keyboard so we can see the inner object there. And you can see it's trying to assume the shape of that sphere, which is what we want. It's not doing a great job. Just have to change a couple of settings. So we'll select the inner object, our dividing cell. Go to shrink wrap in the channel box. And we just have to change closest if no intersection. Turn that from off to on. And you can see it assumes the shape. Now it doesn't do it perfectly. These little extensions are kind of flattened, but we're going to clean those up ourselves. So we'll just make a duplicate of this. This is the deformed inner object. And when you have a deformer on an object and you deform it, and then you make a duplicate of that object, you can now take that object and it's not attached to that deformer anymore, but it keeps its shape. So that's how we're using it. And we'll go back to the original object, go to shrink wrap, and just turn the envelope to 0 so it has no effect. Then we'll get rid of that sphere. So this thing is no longer being deformed by the shrink wrap, but we use the shrink wrap to make this duplicate object in a new shape. Let me just delete the history of both of these things, clean up their transformations. Actually, I'm going to take that back. Don't freeze the transformations on the second object. Sometimes that can cause problems with blend shapes. Okay, so if we look at this now, you can see it's mostly spherical, except these extensions are sort of just kind of flattened. What we're going to do to fix those is use the sculpt deformer. Sorry, not the sculpt deformer, the sculpting brushes. So we'll select this one and go to our relax tool, and you can see we can brush over this, and it tries to average the position of these vertices. And we'll kind of get to a point where it doesn't really know what to do anymore. So if you hold down shift, you can go to your smooth tool, and that will try and fix this as well. And then go back to relax, smooth, relax, smooth. So holding down shift to go to smooth, releasing it to go back to relax, and that's pretty good. Same thing here, relax, 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 smooth. So you can see the smooth is affecting the sphere around here. So we're just trying to minimize that. So just going between smooth and relax to get rid of this little bump. So something like that. If you need your brush to be bigger, hold down B, left mouse drag. If you need it to be stronger or weaker, hold down M and left mouse up and down. So relax, relax, relax. Save your scene. Smooth, shift for smooth, release for relax. Relax, relax. Now if you run into problems where you can't fix this, you can always actually just, go into vertex mode and try and grab this point and, move it however you want. But usually this does a good enough job. So let's say that's good. Save our scene. So we've just created a spherical version of this object, but it has all the same points. And the reason we want to do that is because a blend shape needs objects to have the same points to use them as targets, so the same number of vertices. So we'll select this object, and if you don't have it open already, go to Windows, Animation Editor, Shape Editor. I already have mine open down here. With the cell selected, create blend shape. And normally you would just say add target, and we'll do that for another step in this animation. But in this case, we want to select its pal over here and go to create, add selection as target. And now if we go like this, then we've got a good blend shape that goes from one to the other. That's great. So I'm just going to hide this original target. It'll go all the way up to the end. So that's the first part of our animation. Let's turn wireframe on shaded here. And now we want to cleave this in the middle. So select the blend shape and we'll add a new target. And you can see it says edit here. That means anything I do to this shape now will be recorded. But notice I say anything I do to the shape because we have to make changes at the component level. So to vertices, to edges, or to faces. If we make changes at the object level, so scaling, rotating, and translating the whole object will not be recorded as a blend shape change. So here we're going to, let's say, select these middle edges, double click, and scale this in. Double click to select that one. Double click to select this one. It's interrupted in the middle by these little pieces, and then we'll just put these together. And maybe we'll just move these, these ones up a bit. You can see it gets a little problematic when we have to go through those extrusions. But it should be okay. Actually, forget it. I'll just leave it as is. Pretend I'm happy with this. So that's just having this happen here. Turn off edit, and now we'll create another target. And now we'll take vertices and stretch these up. Maybe scale these ones in. So this is all being recorded in our blend shape. Maybe just move these up a bit. I hit B to get soft selection. And let's just see how this looks. Maybe I wanted to really pinch in the middle here. This is maybe too much, but let's just go with it. This would be a little different than the animation I demonstrated earlier. But here we have the components for our animation now. So we can have it go spherical, we can have it cleave in the middle, and then we can have it stretch up. And in fact, I think I want it to stretch a little bit more, so I'll just turn on edit again, grab these points, and do something like that. Right, so that's recorded now. So that's a really handy way to do something like this. Now let's just go back, and what we want to have happen after that point is for two daughter cells to appear. And the easiest way to do it is just to make duplicates of the original one. Now you don't have to do it this way. You can make two brand new things, but for our purposes this should work. We're going to select the original cell and go to Edit, Duplicate Special, open up the options, and we want two copies, and we want to make sure we duplicate the input graph. That means these blend shapes will be duplicated as well. So Duplicate Special, and now if we take, let's call this one daughter 1, call this one daughter 2. You'll notice that these hidden cells are also duplicated, and that's because they're part of the input graph. Those are the spherical targets that we made earlier. So let's just move daughter 1 up. Let's move daughter 2 down. And let's take the original one and blend shape it into its final position, and we'll just align these. So this one is pretty good. And then this one have to go something like that, because we're going to swap them in. Now let's just rotate this one around a little bit. And we can always change that afterwards as well. Let's hide daughter 1 and daughter 2. Hit H, and let's animate. So we'll start animating these blend shapes on the original cell. So we'll set a key on this first one, which makes it go spherical. Right click and go to key, and then let's say over 20, say 30 frames. This goes all the way. Key this again. And then I'm just going to jump back a few frames and key the cleaving blend shape. And then, over around 30 frames that happens, and then we'll key that. Then go back a few frames and start the stretching key. And then go, I don't know, around 30 frames or so. Stretch that up and set a key. Let's see how this looks. Okay, it's working. It's a little boring, but it's working. Let's fix those keyframes a little bit, or the interpolation between them. Go to Windows, Animation Editors, Graph Editor. Those are the curves between all the keys here. And I'm going to select all these. Now, if you don't have your tangents set up to be weighted, you'll have to turn that on. So if you go to Tangents, turn on Free Tangent Length. And also go to Curves, Weighted Tangents. You can change your default here so they're always weighted like mine. And if you're used to After Effects or other programs that use this sort of thing, Maya is frustrating because its default is that they are not weighted. But mine are turned on now, so I'm just going to pull these out. So you can see I'm exaggerating the ease out and the ease on all of them. So it's going to slowly, then quick, and then slow. Make kind of an interesting animation. Let's take a look. This last one could even be a little bit faster, I think, because we want it to, it's almost like we don't want it to ease into that last position, because we don't want it to feel like it's stopping. We want to see like it's going to continue, and then it will pop and turn into those other two cells, right? And I think it's a little too slow. So this is the last one. Let's just make it a little bit faster to adjust our easing a bit. Let's see how this looks. Could be even faster. It still feels a little bit slow. So what frame are we on here? Starting at 47, and it's going to 69, so it's about 20 frames. So let's just move that over, so it's only about 10 frames now, so slightly less than half a second. I'm just going to move this down here so it's easier for us to see. Yeah, okay, that's better, because now we want, at this point, right on this keyframe, this is not quite on a frame now, so let me just move this over. Just make sure that's good. Okay, now we're going to set a key on the visibility of this object. So in the channel box, we can right click, key selected, visibility is on, and then 1 frame later, set this to 0 and set a key on it. And then we'll just do the reverse for the daughter cells. So right now their visibility is off, so we'll key that, and then 1 frame later we'll key those on. Okay, and of course these are in their sort of grown phase already, so we'll just go into the blend shape for the top one and change the dividing cells blend shape to 1, so it's spherical, and we'll do the same thing for this one here. So this is just a representation of these blend shapes over here. Just the first one is showing up in here. So let's deselect everything. Right, so we get this kind of pop, but we also want these things to be moving, and they're also a little big, actually. Now that I see them, I'm just going to make them a little bit smaller. And let's just, even still, maybe a bit smaller to match. And then we want to set keys on their movement. So we want them to be already moving when they appear. So we'll set a key on translate Y for both of the daughter cells, and on rotation too. So we want them to gradually move up a little bit and down a little bit, and maybe rotate, and just rekey these things. Key selected, select this one, and key selected. Let's deselect everything. Let's save our scene and play back and see how it goes. Bit of a weird pop there. I think they get a little too small. And let's take a look at that again. Okay, that's good. I think part of the problem is that there's an ease out on their translation. So let's check that out here. And so translate Y. Yeah, so this is translate Y for the top one. Let's make that linear. Then make that really ease into its final position. I can just select. Okay. I'm not sure what is going on here. Okay, very strange. Let's make sure my tangents are weighted. Okay. something a little odd is happening. So let's just go back to translate Y. Are the tangents locked? Did I lock them? No. Oh, it's because I'm in scale mode for some reason. I think. There we go. Sorry. So we just want to make this a nice linear tangent going out. And then we'll do the same thing for this one here. Translate Y, linear tangent going out. Ease it in. Then I think we should do the same thing for rotate. Let's linearize them going out. And for all of them, I missed that one. And then for daughter cell 1, same thing. Let's see how this looks now. Just deselect everything. I think it looks a little funny because we can see the wireframe. If we turn that off, let's see if it seems a little more normal. Yeah, there's a bit of a jump there. Maybe they're a little too far apart. Yeah, maybe they need to start moving a little more quickly. Anyway, I'll just leave it like that for now because we want to add one more element. They split apart. And then let's have each of these start to grow out their extensions. So we'll just set a key in the blend shape here on the first attribute. And then over time, have those grow. Set a key. And then we'll do the same thing for the other one. We just won't have it at exactly the same time. Let's have this one start a little bit earlier. Set a key on the first one. Then maybe it finishes a little bit earlier. And we'll set a key there. And then, of course, we'll have to go into the graph editor and change those. So that is the blend shape. Yeah, and I think, actually, this is probably fine. We don't want it to be too fast in the middle, so let's just see. Right, they kind of get a little still here, so you could animate them moving around a little bit more. There is still a bit of a weird pop. Maybe at the very beginning, we should just have them. We just go back to their translate. Just maybe move them up a tiny bit. This one down a tiny bit. So I'm just rekeying these. So I don't want to. I keyed some other things by accident, I think, when I was messing around with the graph editor. So let's take a look now. It's a bit of a jump there still, but you get the idea. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to do here is, if you want to, you can add a noise onto the same noise onto all three of these things. So if let's just start by adding it to this one here. So we'll select this and go to Deform, Texture, and in the attribute editor, just make sure the direction is set to normal. That's the only thing you have to change. And then in the texture, we'll add a 3D Maya texture. I don't think this works with Arnold texture, so we'll just add a volume noise, and you can see kind of messes it up here. So we'll just reduce the amplitude, maybe increase the frequency. And if you animate time, it will kind of just burble through this. So that's what we'll do. And you can play around with all these different settings, but I'll just set a key on the first frame. And then over 500 frames, let's say I set this to 30 and set another key. Right, so there's just a little bit of motion. Now we want to apply the same texture deformer to these two, but we'll do it separately, but just link up the same volume noise. So if we make change to one, make change to all three. So again, we'll just go to deform, texture, select this one, deform, texture. Now, if we want to get that same volume noise here, one way we can do it is select this object and go to the node editor and map out this object. And there's the volume noise that we have attached to it. So with that selected, we can select the first daughter cell, go to its texture deformer, and then just middle mouse drag from this volume noise onto this texture, and it will make the connection. And we'll just do the same thing for the other daughter. So that way, if I make a change to this volume noise, it will flow into all three of the texture deformers. So let's see. Right, so you can see they're burbling around a little bit. And just for fun, if you want to, you can add the jiggle deformer. Let's add it to one, and we won't add it to the other, just so we can see the difference. We go to deform, jiggle deformer, and just add it as is, and open the channel box, go to jiggle. One thing you want to change right away with the jiggle deformer is the jiggle weight. It doesn't work well at 1, so if you reduce it to a slightly lower value like 0.98, it will work a little better, although even now it's going to be a little wonky, I think. Right, so you can see it's jiggling a lot. So you can play around with the stiffness and the damping. So if we turn down the stiffness to, let's say, 0.2, but turn the damping up to 0.8, and maybe turn the weight down to 0.8. We'll just see if this works. It's not great. Ignore transform is off. That means that with this off, it will react to the transformation stopping. So when it stops moving, stops rotating, it will jiggle in response to that. So I'm going to reduce the damping down to a lower value and see how that goes. That's still a weird pop in the middle. That looks okay. Anyway, and then the very last thing you should do to hide all of the things going on here is assign the same material. I've got one called Cell Shader, and this is just the Honey preset in the Arnold Standard Surface Shader. So now if we render it, it will look like this, and when they are close together, right, so this is when it's the two separate models. And then this one forms, and now that it's read both of them. Yeah, I think I see the problem now. It's like this, and then they come down closer together. I think they have to be a little farther apart at the beginning. So they kind of leap away. So right now they shrink down here and here between, oops, this point. Yeah, and they kind of pop down just a little bit. So you can play around with the position on those sort of things, but you can see that you get kind of a nice animation that's easy to control and to edit, and it just uses very simple tools in Maya. Okay, good luck.